I'm the only writer who wrote for both Deep Space Nine and Babylon 5, and I'm also the only writer who wrote for both Smurfs and Friday the 13th series.
Captain's Pod, Stardate 811123.2. Welcome aboard the Starship Sinterprise, and thank you for joining us as we take a brief shore leave from the world of CinemaSins to explore the universe of Star Trek. I'm your Captain Ian Whittington, and with me as always, she claims to be a science fiction writer from the 1950s, but no one believes her. It's Ambassador Deneé, who will not understand that reference at all.
Nope, but people do think I'm a vampire, so I have been around for a really long time, and you never know. I could have written all kinds of things
You've done so much, you've now forgotten about it. Now, we are not alone on the bridge of the Sinterprise today. If you've watched a genre cartoon between the year 2000 and 1941, there's a good chance that he wrote on it. It's time to make first contact with the head of Space Command. Joining us from far beyond the stars, it's Marc Scott.
Hi, guys. Glad to be here. Yay!
Hello. Welcome aboard, sir. How are you?
Yes, I'm very, very well. It's a thrill to be with both of you, and the best part of my day.
Yes.
Okay, so usually Captain Ian wants to know what you would want from the replicator.
If you could order one thing right now.
Yeah.
Ooh. Well, the first thing that came to my mind was Robbie the Robot. So from Forbidden Planet, that would
Yes.
be.
I can't believe we don't already have one of those. That's amazing.
Yeah.
We do now.
When I was in high school, one of my friends, Fred Barton, made a completely accurate, full-size Robbie the Robot, and he's still doing that all these years later. He makes them for a living.
That's
And
amazing.
and he makes full-size time machines, from the George Pal movie and
Yes.
all sorts of cool stuff. I mean, he didn't have to grow up at all. It was
that's beautiful.
phenomenal.
Nice.
That's one of my favorite projects with my dad. We built a full-size TARDIS from Doctor Who, and the intent was to put tools and stuff inside it, but we just couldn't bring ourselves to do it. It was too perfect, so it just sat in the garden.
Well, the funny thing about Doctor Who, about the TARDIS, of course, is that in '63 it was like supposed to blend in as a police box, so that it wouldn't look like it's like a phone booth. It's anything, right? And now, of course, people look at that and just go, "It's a TARDIS."
It's now a TARDIS. It's like, what do you mean police box? Like it's surpassed the thing that it was imitating. It's beautiful when that happens. It's so great. Much like the Enterprise, which has kind of outgrown the real enterprises that we have, that's amazing.
Yes.
Well, if you for some reason don't know who Marc is, I am going to just give a snippet of his IMDb, which is just incredible, starting with the Incredible Hulk animated TV show, He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, Smurfs, the Biscuits, Super Friends, the Mighty Orbits, They Get Along, The Pole Position, The Little Centurions, Galaxy High School, Bionic 6, Captain Power, The Real Ghostbusters, oh my goodness, Friday the 13th, the series, Something, Star Trek The Next Generation, Star Trek Deep Space Nine, James Bond Jr. It goes on and on. What an incredible career.
Yes. Well, and you didn't even get to a Space Precinct or a Sliders, any of that stuff. So
it keeps going. It's incredible.
I worked with both Gene Roddenberry and Jerry Davis. I mean, that's pretty.
That's some bucket list stuff that a lot of people will never be able to do.
And Jerry Anderson as well.
Oh, Jerry Anderson. Oh, what did you do with Jerry Anderson? Because that's what my dad would absolutely be really interested in.
Space Precinct.
Oh, of course it was. Yes.
It was a live-action show with audio animatronic alien heads. I think I wrote 4 of those.
That's amazing. Yeah,
pretty amazing. And I grew up with Supercar and Fireball XL5 and all that stuff.
Oh, so. Thunderbirds, Captain Scarlet.
Did you know you wanted to write early on in your life?
Well, I was a science fiction fan as long back as I can remember. My favorite book when I was 7
is behind you.
Behind me. It was Farmer in the Sky by Robert Heinlein.
Oh,
there you go. And so the real turning point was when I was 10 and Star Trek debuted, the original Star Trek, and it was amazing. It just like kind of popped my head open and poured all this cool stuff in, and I was so thrilled by it. And it was so revolutionary that I recorded at 10 years old. I recorded every episode on reel-to-reel audio tape in case it never aired again.
Yes,
because we didn't have VCRs, we didn't have any of that stuff, and so
you did the first audiobook.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, and so then and so I was an artist and a writer growing up, and my degree is in painting, sculpture, and graphic arts from UCLA. I had gallery shows of my art when I was a teenager, but by the time I sold my first short story at 19, I knew I wanted to be a writer, particularly a writer, producer, and TV. and then off we went.
That's
So it was,
Off you
incredible.
went. What part
yeah.
of the world were you living in at that time?
I was very lucky. I grew up in Los Angeles. So
Ah.
my parents divorced when I was 3, and my mom had a variety of husbands and boyfriends and so forth. And one of her boyfriends, when Star Trek was on the air when I was 10, he said, "I have a surprise for you." And he took me to this apartment, knocked on the door, and Nichelle Nichols opened the door. It was her
Oh,
apartment,
that's
and she
amazing.
gave me a signed photo of herself as Uhura. This is when the show was on, and she gave me one of the signed scripts, her signed script. All the Uhura lines are circled because that's how she memorized them. So I was a very smart kid. So I said to her when she gave me the script, I said, "Do you have any more of these?" And she reached in her waist, reached in her wastebasket and pulled out 5 more scripts from 5 different episodes. So I still have those.
Oh,
And
that is
Oh.
yeah,
phenomenal. That is
Did
gold.
you read those and then sort of
oh
get
yeah,
an idea of how then to
yes.
write a script?
Yes, very much so, and ironically, 50 years later, when we were shooting Space Command, I got to have Nichelle Nichols in Space Command. So I went to
Oh.
her house for the shoot.
Oh,
She was
wow.
wonderful, and I brought the scrapbook I kept when I was 10 years old that had the signed photo from her and the letters she wrote me and all these articles about her, and we sat flipping through it, all these years
What an
later, and she
incredible way
signed
to come full
my
circle.
little scrapbook.
That's
Yeah, it
really,
was great.
really special because we're
Yeah,
at a sad point in history where all of these people are expectedly passing away and
yes,
no longer with us.
yes,
So that's
yes,
so, so special.
yes, and it's yes.
Wow, that's amazing.
Oh, and then I got to go to the original Star Trek set for the last episode they ever shot, and, Turnabout Intruder,
What an
and,
episode.
that was
Did you like sneak in or were
no,
you like
so
welcomed?
I'm such I was such a Trekkie that first of all, when they were gonna cancel Star Trek after season 2, I actually was there at NBC with my little picket sign,
Yes.
little 10-year-old kid.
That's
We got the
amazing.
3rd season we got the 3rd season. So everyone around me knew I was a huge fan. So both my stepmom, my dad's, 2nd wife, and a friend of mine who was a college student who'd interviewed Gene Roddenberry for the school paper, they both wrote to Star Trek and said, "There's this kid who just loves Star Trek. Can he come visit the set?" This was the last episode they ever shot. If I had been a week later,
Oh,
there would be no
no.
Star Trek. Okay, I got right under the wire. And, so it was a Turnabout Intruder. I got to see Shatner. I got to see McCoy. I got to
Yeah.
sit in the chair and stand on the transporter, see the little light bulb that was screwed in up
Oh, my
top.
goodness. Oh, my
No, it's not a
goodness.
light
I
bulb.
can't
No, no,
imagine
it's
it.
not a light bulb. It's
It's a
magic.
real transporter,
It's
okay?
magical
Yes,
Don't you ruin that
yes,
for
sparklies.
me.
yes. I remember being on the engineering set, and there was like this wire, and then the engineering supposedly went back forever, but it was forced perspective, so it was actually very narrow. And I thought, oh,
Oh.
that's a lot smaller than I thought. And
Oh, how clever.
it
Might
was,
be the only
but
10-year-old that was disappointed by the Enterprise.
no, it was wonderful. It
No,
was
I
really
bet. That's
It was like
incredible.
going through the mirror, and
Wow.
That's
one of the fun parts
amazing.
was, one of the stagehands said, "Last show of the season," and under her breath, Majel Barrett, who was playing Nurse Chapel,
Uh-huh.
she muttered under her breath, and I was the only one who heard, she said, "Last show ever." And of course, that wasn't true.
Oh,
She went
no.
on to be the computer voice on Next Gen, and when I did the
Yes.
Star Trek New Voyages episode with George Takei, I went to her house and recorded her as the computer voice
Oh,
of the Enterprise.
beautiful.
So,
Because that's
so we
one of
got to
the
work together.
rare side projects that kind of got a Paramount, okay, you can do it without
Yes,
quote unquote being canon and whatnot. That's a really special
right.
position to be in.
It was amazing. It was amazing because I got to direct George Takei as Sulu, and in fact, my YouTube channel, Mr. Sci-Fi, we have that entire episode. It was
Hmm.
nominated for the Hugo. It was nominated for the Hugo and the Nebula, and it won the
Oh.
TV Guide Award. So
It's
it
great.
was,
I mean, if it
Ah.
came out like today in 2023, it would
yeah,
just be canonized. It would just be
yeah,
a thing
yeah,
that is out there. It's such a
yes,
what a pocket of time to release it in. It's so
I know.
interesting.
It was great. Well, it was the last time that George played Sulu. It was the last time that Grace Lee Whitney played Yeoman Rand,
Mm.
and the last time that Majel Barrett was the computer voice. So
I mean,
plus,
Amazing.
there's so much Star Trek I want to get into, and I want to talk about Space Command as well. But I've
please.
I've
Lock
got
in. We're
to
going to be
ask.
here all day.
I've got to ask. Like, how was George Takei? Because I've seen him at conventions and stuff. He seems like a man that is just absent of ego and just loves being in Star Trek and just feels like an incredible person to be with. So what was it like directing him?
He's an amazing man, an amazing man. He was always one of my favorite characters on Star Trek, and they never gave him the great Sulu episode he deserved.
Never.
And so when I found out that there were these fans making their own Star Trek episodes, I said, well, I can utilize that platform. They were getting more viewers than Enterprise was getting at the time on
Oh,
UPN.
ouch,
And
ouch, but
it
true.
rebuilt, rebuilt all the original Enterprise sets. So I reached out to my friend Michael Reeves, who'd also written for Star Trek: The Next Generation. He's an Emmy winner for Batman, and I said, "You want to write?" He'd come up with this great Sulu episode in the '70s when they were going to bring back Star Trek as Phase
For phase
Two,
two, yeah.
and I said, "Let's do this." And I contacted the boys in upstate New York where the sets were, and I can upgrade all your equipment. And they said, "Great." And so we spent 6 months building the team. And I went to George's house and pitched him this. And I said, "You know, you're a great actor. I've seen you in many things beyond Star Trek, and you never got the great Sulu episode you deserved, and this is it." And I typed up the outline as a little précis, and I said, "Read this. You've got to tell me right now if you're going to do it." And, he read it and he said, "Yeah, I'm in." And then his agent called and said, "Well, we can't commit to George doing this until, the script is written." And I said, "You don't understand. If George doesn't do it, we won't
There
write
is
the
no
script.
script,
We're not
yeah.
gonna make the episode." 'Cause George was the only one to play
Yeah.
Sulu, of course.
Right.
And, so then he spent months lifting weights. He lost 15 pounds for the role. Amazing,
Wow.
Wow.
phenomenal shot. She did not look his age at all. And he was great to work with. And then we built his ship, the
Mhm.
Excelsior, here in LA, and shot those
Oh,
scenes here.
wow.
And Christina Moses played his daughter. That was her first TV role. Now she's been starring in a million little things on ABC. She's phenomenal. She's going to be in Space Command as well, as she actually already is. We've already shot
Oh,
some of her
amazing.
scenes.
That's
That's
It's
so
cool.
incredible. That's
fun.
so fun. Well,
Yeah.
that's an excellent segue into what I guess is it fair to say is the culmination of Marc Scott Zicree. Like this feels like your real passion project, and
Yes.
that's Space Command. Let's
Yes.
dive in. Tell us all about it.
Well, it's really amazing because Star Trek shaped me.
Mm.
Star Trek 3 shows made me who I am and made me wanna be a writer, which were The Outer Limits, The Twilight Zone, and Star Trek, the original versions of those 3.
Hmm.
And I wrote a book about the Twilight Zone called The Twilight Zone Companion to learn how to write and produce television. But also what gave me the first idea to be a writer-producer was The Making of Star Trek by Gene Roddenberry and Stephen Whitfield, which came out when I was 13. And because 'cause I'd never read a book about a TV show before. And so I began this great journey. I was writing for TV by the time I was 22 or 23, started writing the Twilight Zone book at, 21, and, had this amazing career journey writing for all the studios and networks and hundreds of hours of TV. And but then for 30 years, I've been running this roundtable of writers, directors, actors, producers, anyone in film, TV, or books, just to create a compassionate Hollywood. We've been meeting every Thursday here in LA and via Zoom, and we have thousands of members around the world. It was just to make Hollywood the way I
That's
want it.
amazing.
Yeah, and because Hollywood has such a reputation for being just,
Cutthroat.
cruel.
Yeah.
Yeah, and filled with assholes and all that stuff, and that's true. But there's
But
also a
there's
Holly
more.
Yeah.
Yes, there's a Hollywood of good people who write from the heart, who are creating work of meaning, like Roddenberry, like Rod Serling, like, I wrote a book with Guillermo del Toro not long
Mm.
ago. Guillermo's one of those, of course, and, so I thought, "Okay." So I created this roundtable, and a few years ago, I noticed that all the science fiction in film and TV at the time was very dark, very dystopic,
Mm.
Mm.
and it was sort of like saying the future's gonna suck and there's nothing you can do about it. And I thought, "Well, that's not any kind of message to send." And so I wanted to do something that was inspiring, like Star Trek had inspired me when I was a kid. But and a lot of my friends are showrunners, and they said, "Let's team up, let's walk this in, let's get a pilot deal." But, I could have been cut off at script, I could have been cut off at pilot, or the network suits could have given me notes that would have wrecked it,
Yeah.
Right.
No,
or put it
too light and too nice. You have to make it dark. We've got to have some. Who's the enemy? Yeah.
or they would just say, "Make it stupid." They wouldn't say it like that, but
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was actually in the room with the head of the Sci-Fi Channel when he said, I tried to watch that Babylon 5 and I just don't get it, and I tried to watch Sliders and I don't understand it."
Mm.
And I thought to myself, "You should not be running this
This
network."
hurts. That's painful to hear. Like, why are you
Yeah.
in this job?
Because they just plug a regular executive
Yeah.
into things,
Yeah.
whether or not he's simpatico with the
Yep.
genre. This is
Yeah.
years ago. It's no longer the same
Yeah.
person. But, but the point was, I didn't say, "You're an idiot and you shouldn't have this job," because
Mhm.
he was writing the checks, right? And
Yeah.
so
Smart.
if yeah, and I've been very lucky. I've worked with great executives. I have a body of work that I'm very proud of, but Space Command, I really wanted to have autonomy, and I agree with Joe Straczynski that if you're going to want your work to come out the way you want it to come out, you have to step up, you have to take power and
Mm-hmm.
responsibility. So through my roundtable, I've been hearing all about crowdfunding. And I'd never raised the money before. I just worked for the studios and the networks. So I thought, well, let's give this a try. So we set a campaign, Kickstarter campaign, our first one. And our goal was $75,000 to raise in 2 months. And
Wow.
we raised that in 3 days. And then we went on, and over the course of that 2 months, we raised $221,000. And over the last few years, between several Kickstarter campaigns and also selling investment shares for $7,500 each, where the investors get a portion of my producers' net profits, my fans have given me $4 million.
That's
And so
incredible. That's
Oh,
just
that's
incredible.
oh,
so
amazing,
great.
amazing. So now we have a studio with 3 sound stages, 2 small ones and 1 big one, and
Oh, that's
yeah,
mind-boggling.
yeah, and
What a leap.
we're just finishing shooting hour 6 of the 12-hour season of Space Command. We have 5 more series waiting in the wings that I'm co-creating with the creators of Farscape and The Expanse and a new Rod
Oh
Serling
my
show and
God.
tons of
Sorry.
stuff.
Well,
I'm gonna
this
And
calm
is
down.
this is one of the incredible things. So I've seen the first 10 episodes. They're so much fun. And what strikes me is that you've just surrounded yourself with incredible people in the sci-fi world, like Doug Drexler, like not even mentioning the cast and everyone. There's just I know that person, I know that person, I know that person, just really passionate sci-fi people. Like, how did you go about wrangling all of these people?
Was
it
it the
was
round table?
No, this was because I'd written for so many hundreds of hours of TV and produced so many hours, I knew a lot of the actors. And so, for instance, Bob Picardo, when he saw the Sulu episode I did with George, he said, "I want to work with you." So I wrote a role specifically for Bob in Space Command. He'll be back again in the show, and he's also in another show we're creating called Sweet Haven, the one I'm doing with Rockne O'Bannon. And then let's see, Mira Furlan, and Bill Mumy, I worked with on Babylon 5. I also interviewed Bill when I wrote The Twilight Zone Companion because he was in some great episodes of The Twilight Zone. And let's see, and Bill brought Bruce Boxleitner into the equation. And then Ferran Tahir, who was in JJ's Star Trek, he's the Starfleet captain who gets skewered at the beginning.
Yes, the poor guy.
He, yeah, I came across him, cast him, Nichelle Nichols. We were doing a Space Command Presence booth at Comic-Con in San Diego, and I got a call from a friend of mine. He said, "Listen, I have a favor to ask." I thought, "What is it?" And he said, "Nichelle Nichols needs a place to sign photos. Would you be willing to let her use your booth?" I said, "Well,
Oh.
How
yes,
can I say yes, but quicker?
of course." And so then I was talking to Nichelle. I said, "I'd like you to be in Space Command," and she said, "Sure." And and then Sean Kenny, who played Captain Pike in The Menagerie,
Mm-hmm.
boo,
Yeah, in the
um,
chair.
he's in, he's in, he's in Space Command. I met him at conventions, and in Armin Shimmerman's been a friend forever. When I saw the pilot of DS9,
Mm-hmm.
I said I got to meet that guy, and we became close friends, and it just goes on like
That's
that.
so
Ethan,
fun. They must love is there an element but they love the freedom of this being independent as well? Like this
yes,
feels
yes,
more
yes,
like
yes,
fun than
yes,
work.
yes. Well, also, and Doug Jones, the way I got Doug was I won the Saturn Award one year, and I was at the event, and there was this tall, thin guy in this amazing Victorian jacket.
Mm-hmm.
So I walked up to compliment him on the jacket, and it was Doug Jones. And at the time, I was writing the book with Guillermo del Toro. So we started talking, and I took him to lunch a few days later, and he has this amazing, sensitive face. And I said, "I'm going to write an episode for you. I'm going to write a character for you, and we're going to see that amazing face." And
Oh.
and then he got cast in, Shape of Water and Discovery and off,
But
but I
you're
got
right.
him.
He is always in prosthetics. Like even
Yes,
Discovery, massive prosthetic.
yes.
But he does have this beautiful, like expressive face that we never get
I
to
mean,
see.
yes, exactly. If he had a face that looked like someone's rear end, you would
You would think, yeah, put a
understand
mask on
why
that.
they cover him
Make him
up.
a Ferengi.
But no, he's got such a delicate and sensitive face. He's a wonderful
His
actor.
eyes just express so much. It reminds me of like LeVar Burton. Like it's great that Geordie has a visor and that's iconic. But you hid LeVar's eyes?
I know,
Whose
I
idea was
know.
that?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. It's funny. One friend of mine, his kids were big fans of Reading Rainbow, And then one day he had a Next Gen on, and they saw LeVar, and they said, "Daddy, why has LeVar got that thing over his eyes?" And he said, "Well, oh, he's blind." And they said, "LeVar is blind." And they both
Oh
burst into
no!
tears.
Oh no! So many
Aw,
questions that immediately pop up. That's
but
amazing.
he
Hilarious,
reads. He
hilarious.
reads to me on
I do
TV.
Yeah,
just.
exactly.
I don't have a specific question about this, but I do think that Doug Jones and Robert Picardo, in particular, their
Yes,
performances in Space Command are just
yes.
they're just great. They're so good. They're
Um,
up there with anything they've done in Star Trek, and it just I think that speaks to how passionate they are to be working with you and getting in on this project as well. It's so
But
fun.
when you see them in scenes together in Space Command, they're so wonderful. They have such a chemistry,
Mm.
Oh,
and
it's so fun.
it's just amazing. And Mira Furlan, whom we lost during COVID, sadly, she got West Nile virus, and
Mm.
but I'd worked with her in Babylon 5, and she was so remarkable back then. I thought I'm going to write. I've got to work with her again. So I approached her for Space Command, and I said it before we even rolled camera. I took her to lunch, and I said. I don't know much about your character yet, but I can tell you this. She's a xenoarchaeologist. She has a fiery but loving relationship with her grown daughter, and she is not defined by a man. And she said,
Mm.
I'm in. I'm in.
Yeah, let's do it.
So yeah,
And
yeah,
there's
yeah,
a
yeah.
I
great
like
line
that.
between her and Robert Picardo's character, which kind of
Yes.
cements that really well. Yeah, I love how intentional that is.
Have you
Yeah.
had a situation yet where you've had a little 10-year-old come to sit on your set?
Actually, I'll tell you a very interesting story in that regard. And when you mentioned the 10 episodes that you've seen, those were the webisodes. We took the
Yes.
first 2 hours. We put the first 2 hours into 10 webisodes, but actually Space Command is structured as 2-hour stories that split down the middle as 1-hour episodes.
Oh, that's
So
cool.
it's a 12-hour season
Hmm.
made up of
Oh,
6
okay.
6 interlocking, um, sta tales, right? So in terms of a kid coming on set, there was one point when I was doing the Kickstarter campaign and we were shooting Redemption and so forth, and um, one of the fans, and it was taking a long time to finish the first 2 hours because it had 1,900 visual effect shots, and so so someone online was like saying, "Why is it taking so long?" And someone else piped up and typed in, uh, "You take the time you need, Mark. You're doing a wonderful job." And I don't say this lightly because I'm just entering hospice. So I contacted him, I said, "Doesn't terminally ill," and he had a wife and a young daughter,
Mm.
and so I said, "Okay, I'm gonna do something, you can't put this out, but I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna send you the rough cuts of all of the episodes we've shot, so
Oh,
you can see them
wow.
because he wasn't gonna be around to see the final
Oh,
That's
version."
gosh, it's
incredible.
heartbreaking and beautiful at the
Yeah,
same
and
time.
and then when we were shooting on our set for an episode called Forgiveness, I had her and her mom come on set. Her dad had passed away a few years ago, and so we cast her in the show.
Oh,
She and her mom got
wow.
to play abducted pilgrims. We gave her some lines, and she was so happy, this child, that she was literally dancing on our
Oh,
stage.
that's
Did
And
you have a
beautiful.
flashback to like your youth and how you felt when you went onto the set?
well, it's magical. That's one of the wonderful things about science fiction. You're not just creating a story or characters, you're creating a universe.
Yeah.
And when I step onto my spaceship sets, of which
Mm.
I have many now, I've got a big alien spaceship, I've got all these other human spaceships.
It's
It's
so fun.
so cool. We got the giant robot, we've got 30 spacesuits. I mean, great. So, yes,
Any
it's
any just in the trash? Any spacesuits in the trash? I can just
CinemaSins
have you
no.
needs a
sign
new
one and then
uniform.
I'll tell you, my friend Greg Jean, who built the city in Blade Runner and the mothership in Close Encounters, he was one day years ago working at MGM, and the bosses had told the custodial staff to empty out one of the rooms and throw out everything, right? One of the storerooms. And he looked on the dumpster, and there was the entire suit from 2001. And I'm
No.
taking that home.
oh,
And
Yeah.
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So, but that's how it works.
What a different
Oh, I
mindset we
know.
had. Like
Amazing.
everything now is
It's
instantly
yeah.
I
nostalgia and
know.
instantly on an
I
auction or
I know.
I
something.
did
But
interrupt your thought though about the child on set and if
Yes.
you had memories. So
Yes.
I want you to finish that if
It's
that's okay.
it's just magical. And so when people come on the set, we often let our backers, like our Kickstarter backers, can have walk-on roles or whatever, and or have a line or wear a spacesuit, all that stuff. And our investors, of course, are always invited to be part of anything we're doing. We take them to Comic-Con and take them to meals and all of that. And
yeah.
we welcome people in. And as my wife says, my wife and I write and direct and produce together. Um, my wife says to everyone who comes on the set, you can post, you can take photos, We are not. You don't have to sign an NDA. It's like
Oh.
we are transparent. And
That's so
yeah,
fun.
yeah. So she got to pose with the 8 foot tall alien creature and all that stuff.
That's
That's
brilliant.
amazing.
Now, you did mention the sheer volume of visual effects in this
Yes,
show, and there's a lot of them, and it's
yes,
just kind of stunning what you can do
yes, yeah,
nowadays. Yeah. So what was it like pulling all of that together and just visualizing and directing that stuff?
yeah.
That's a lot of it is on a green screen or a blue screen
No,
or something
well,
like that.
interesting. It's the question yesterday. Someone asked me when I did the live stream for my studio, which you can actually watch at Mr. Sci-Fi on YouTube, um, because I was giving a tour of all the spacesuits and the sets and all that. About 70% of the first 2 hours is entirely on sets that we built physically.
Hmm.
So the mining operation on Mars,
Oh
the
wow.
Paladin corridor, the mining the operation, series. We have something happening on a series. We have something happening on Titan.
Hmm.
Um, so we augment it with green screen, but we don't have it dominate, and so
Hmm.
Mm.
it's a balance that you strike, and the second 2-hour episode, Forgiveness, has even more, physical sets.
Wow.
We built this gigantic alien spaceship and, really, amazing, insane, but, but 1900 visual effects, is more than Star Wars. I mean, it's truly nuts, and, so you have to find a lot of people who don't because we can't pay studio rates, so they have to but
Hmm.
what we do is we give them autonomy. So I'll course correct if I need to, but I'll
Right.
let them also have their head.
This is your
Right.
baby. Yeah.
And,
Well, and you
so
know how
we
valuable
yeah.
that is.
Yeah, so we get an amazing
Mm.
talent pool. I mean, my friend Ian McCaig, who designed Darth Maul and Queen Amidala and Mark, what's his name, Hulk, you know, um,
Mm.
he's our
Hmm.
character designer, so he designed the look
Oh.
of
Oh wow.
Doug Jones's look in Space Command and the uniforms and so forth. And, you find people who are just really some people are just starting out, but they're talented, and other
Mhm.
people are very established, and they'll work for free or for, what I can afford.
Or
So
the passion that
yeah,
they have. I think
That's
it's really
beautiful.
nice when you get around anyone who wants to see what you do
yes,
as a talent, whatever your talent is.
yes,
I'll
yes,
never forget going in for a haircut once and just saying, "I want you to just do what you wanna do," and it
uh,
freaked him out, and I was like, "Well, you went to school for this, like, does
yeah,
anyone ever just let you do what you wanna do?" And just no, and
nope,
sometimes there's
nope,
a little direction needed, but for
yes,
the most part, everybody kinda wants to be able to play in the area where they're,
yeah,
Yeah.
confident,
well,
so
yeah.
no matter what you do.
Well, the fun part is that with Space Command, my wife and I, and I'm sort of the lead dog on Space Command. It was my crazy notion and all that, but Elaine and I are very compatible. We've been together 48 years, married for 46. We write, produce, and
Wow.
direct together. She's the best part of every day, and so we're very compatible. She's a really good director, and so I have the strong visual sense in terms of with my art background and all that. But it's just we basically we write it, we cast it, we shoot it. There's nobody above us in the food chain, and
Yeah.
That's amazing.
that's
What a rare position to be
yeah,
in as well,
yeah,
because like we all want to have that creative, passionate job that we get
Yep.
to live,
yes,
and I think myself and Deneé are really fortunate we get to live that as well.
yes,
But that the whenever you do something for money, it has that tendency to strip some of the
yes,
creativity away
yes,
sometimes. So how beautiful is it that you get to re-inject some of
From
yes,
that
the
into it as
from the
well?
people that are in the community who are like, "No, I wanna empower you to kinda helm the ship and
yes,
guide this
Mm.
idea of a space for open creativity." I mean, the
yeah,
people that are already around you that can
mhm.
be then inspired by and have the ability to express through you is really fun.
I know. Well, I
Mm.
just wrote a book called Greenlighting Yourself, which
There you go.
Mm.
it's available on Amazon, and because it used to be like when I started out as a writer in the late '70s. If you wanted to reach a mass audience, the studios and the networks were the only game in town. If you wanted to do books, the major publishers were the only game in town. If you self-published, it was considered vanity press. It was not treated
Mm.
it wouldn't get reviews or distribution. Now, it's completely different. I mean, I
Yeah.
have my own network on YouTube reaching millions of people for free. I don't have to pay.
Yes.
And via crowdfunding, like, for instance, we're finishing a crowdfunding campaign on Kickstarter right now. We're 2 days away from
Ooh.
from finishing. Our goal was $60,000. We've hit that target. I have to keep my eye on it so no one pulls out at the last minute because it's
Yeah.
all or nothing. But
Right.
but
Yes.
but
That's
someone
the
just
scary thing.
contacted me yesterday who I've never met, and she and her partner wanted to buy 2 shares in Space Command. That's $15,000. We've already got 2 distributors who wanna take the show worldwide. So that,
Oh,
so it's like,
That's
but as a
incredible.
result, I could build this machine, and it was all of these decades, all the way from me being 10 years old on the Star Trek set to writing the Twilight Zone Companion, to writing for all these studios and networks. I learned, and the mentors I had, I mean, we haven't even talked about that. Harlan Ellison, Ted Sturgeon, Ray Bradbury, I mean,
Mm.
amazing people. George Clayton Johnson. George wrote the first episodes of the original Star Trek that ever aired, The Man Trap. Um, I mean, these were
Mm.
my mentors. These were brilliant artists, brilliant creators, and very driven. They had a vision. And Roddenberry, I worked with Roddenberry too. So, I didn't know
Mm.
him well as a friend or mentor, but he was really genius, of
yeah.
course.
Well, he very much. It seemed like he very much wanted to create this space,
Yeah.
much like you are, where science people that are
Yes,
passionate about science fiction can come in and
yes,
write their stories, and like
yeah,
TNG accepting fan
yeah.
submissions, which is
Well
just
well, the fun part is
incredible.
also if someone wants to build a spacesuit, or if they wanna build a creature, or if they wanna paint a wall in a spaceship, I mean, people are welcome to come be part of our world. My email is marczicree@gmail.com, MarczIcree, just like that. And, they can email me at marczicree@gmail.com, and it's like that moment in Aliens where Ripley says, "Is there anything I can do?" And the sergeant says, "I don't know. Is there anything you can do?" And she says, "Well, I can drive that loader." You know? So, speaking
We'll find a place for you.
so the thing is, you know, Harlan, Ted Sturgeon, all these great writers from Star Trek, they were self-made men and writers and women. Dorothy Fontana, DC Fontana was another one of the greats who was a friend and mentor. I'll tell you an amazing story. Um, I recently went to my 50th high school reunion, and the next day was my elementary school reunion, and I knew all of those people, all of them, and many I hadn't seen for over 50 years.
Wow.
So 2 of them I invited to come visit my studio. Now they reminded me that when I was 8 years old, my stepfather built me my own spaceship, and it had, like, Army Air Force surplus controls and lights that lit up with switches and a telegraph key and a porthole with the Earth from space that you could see cut off the record album cover,
Wow.
and so kids from all over the neighborhood would come, and I would give them tours of the solar system, and so I invited 2 of these kids that I'd known back then to my studio, and they came to my studio, and they saw my spaceship sets and all of that, and they said, "You have not
Oh
changed.
wow! It's like, what
You
has
have
he
not
That is
changed
improved?
one
such
bit."
a fun
Yeah.
thing,
They
isn't
said
it?
they said
That's amazing. It
yeah,
just
they
gets
said
into you
it
somewhere.
was great, and they said, "You have followed your vision. You have stayed true to your vision and to yourself."
That's beautiful.
That
Man,
was great.
I really appreciate the book that you mentioned too, because I feel like
Yeah.
some of the things that we'll have are like just questions from people, like how do you get started on
Yes.
any number of things, and
Well, yeah.
so
Well,
Mm.
that's a really cool. So it was called
well,
Green Lighting Yourself, right?
rewriting yourself.
Okay.
Well, the reason I wrote it was because, for some years, my wife and I had been mentoring, in addition to the roundtable that I run, which has always been free. It used to be just in person and then with emails to the thousands of members. Now, during the pandemic, we made it Zoom. So now it's a combination of Zoom and in person in LA. But I realized that a lot of the books and a lot of the common advice, the common sense advice was bullshit. "Well, you just need to write a great
Mm.
script." Well, how many of the TV shows and movies you see are great? Clearly, um
Yeah, I mean, it assumes that everyone else is writing crap.
right, but
It's
also
only you
but
that can write
also
well.
but also clearly, there's a ton of people who don't have great scripts who are still getting their work made, you know,
Yeah.
and
Yes, even more
they'll say,
worryingly.
"Well, just get an agent." Well, that's not an easy thing, or just get a manager. These are not easy things,
Yeah.
and so I wanted to write Greenlighting Yourself because when people say, "They're not letting me have my dream," that used to be true back when I started. You needed
Mm.
studios, you needed networks, but now, one thing science fiction never predicted was that we would all have video cameras in our pockets, right?
Right? I mean, Star Trek came close, but
Yes, yes,
didn't get it
yes.
quite
Well,
right.
I call my cell phone my tricorder, but,
Every day,
yeah,
every day.
right, but the thing is, now with crowdfunding, with
Mm.
YouTube, with the internet, with video cameras in our pockets, if you wanna make a movie, if you wanna make a TV show, you don't need to be stopped. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
when it's like you're stopping yourself
Yeah.
Hmm.
because I mean, our team on Space Command literally is around the world. We have people on our team who are in the Dominican Republic, in Germany, everywhere, and also investors who are everywhere. And the fact that Netflix has legitimized series in foreign languages. For instance, there was during the pandemic, all of our actor friends were stuck at home. So we did a special bonus 2-hour episode where the actors could film themselves. We would direct them long distance. Ian and I
Yes.
wrote the script, and it was a 2-hour episode, bonus episode. And
And they're doing these little things to cameras, aren't they?
yes, sometimes it's
Yes.
monologues, sometimes it's 2 and 3 character scenes.
Mm.
There was one scene between a father and his daughter where they were sitting in the living room, and one of them was actually in Saskatchewan, and the other was actually in Atlanta.
Oh, wow. That's
Practically, we put
fun.
them together.
It's
And,
amazing.
but this was during the pandemic, and again, it was like to show that even with a pandemic, you can still create. You can still
Find a way.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
One of the burning questions I've got is with all of the incredible influences that you've mentioned, 9, TNG, with all of that experience, what did you want to do different with Space Command? Like, what was it from all of that that you thought, I love that, this is what I want my show to do differently?
Yes. One of the things I was very, very interested in was doing something that would be multi-generational. Because,
Mm.
for instance, his father, my grandfather, abandoned the family before my dad was born. My dad only met his father 3 times, and I never met my grandfather. So there's a
Mm.
ripple effect. It's like dominoes of this action leads to this action leads to this action down the generations. And so I was very interested in seeing that. So I created 4 families, and we jumped back and forth over a 200-year span in Space Command. So, for instance, Armin Shimmerman plays Robert Picardo's grandson in Space Command.
Oh,
Okay. Yeah,
fascinating.
it's very fun. And so so I wanted to do that to show cause and effect. And in fact, one kid that we cast when he was 10, we've been on this project for a few years now. He's becoming an adult now. So he's going to be the villain in the next episode we do because he got screwed over as a kid in the first 2 hours.
Oh, what a interesting opportunity. Like, you don't get that chance to branch that far ahead because it's
No,
like, do we get a new season? What's the
right.
point of writing this now if we don't get a season 3?
Everything I write gets made, period. And
That's
fortunately,
beautiful.
even in my TV career, I'd say 95% of what I wrote got made. Very few scripts didn't get made.
Mm.
I was very lucky. I knew that what I wrote would get made. I mean, we all knew that Far Beyond the Stars was gonna be one of the classics, you know.
Well, that's a great transition. How does that feel to have to be the kind of the story man brainchild behind one of the most iconic episodes of Deep Space Nine? And I'm not even going to give it a synopsis because I'd like it to come from you because I know Deneé hasn't seen this episode. A lot of the fans will, but who better to describe Far Beyond the Stars than you,
Yeah,
sir?
well, thanks. Well, my goal in my career, if someone had said to me prior to Space Command, "What's your dream?" My dream would be to do one of the great Star Trek episodes, the handful.
Mission accomplished.
Right,
Well done,
right,
sir.
yes. There are a handful of great episodes. City on the Edge of Forever was like
Yes.
it the thing about City on the Edge of Forever that was so great was every TV show I'd ever seen before that, the hero saved the girl. It was just, like,
Right.
set in concrete. And in this episode, not only does he not save her, he throws her under a truck.
Oh my goodness.
Right?
Quite
Yes,
literally.
literally.
Yeah.
And so
Uh-huh.
and so what that told me was that in your life, there will be things that you have to do because of the right thing to do, but it'll break your heart. And so Star Trek had the opportunity, at its best, to tell a profound truth from the real world that could change people's lives for the better. One
Hmm.
episode of one TV show could do that, whether it's Walking Distance on Twilight Zone or Demon with a Glass Hand on Outer Limits that Harlan wrote. You know, so I wanted to do that. I wanted to do something that would be totally original with a profound truth from my heart. So, so Far Beyond the Stars, uh, the original impetus for it, the inspiration, was, when I was watching Star Trek and Twilight Zone and Outer Limits, I noticed that all the writers who were writing on those shows were also writing the books I was reading, the science fiction stories
Mm.
I was reading, and novels. Ted Sturgeon, Harlan Ellison, Richard Matheson, Charles Beaumont, Ray Bradbury, Rod Serling, and so first of all, it showed me that I could also do books as well as TV shows. But but I also realized that these guys, these science fiction writers, started in the 40s and 50s, mainly the 50s, writing for the love of it, writing for the magazines, Galaxy, Astounding, Worlds of If, and for a penny a word, 5 cents a word, and that world had never been shown to the larger science fiction public. The fans, there would be no Star Trek, there would be no Star Wars, if not for Ted Sturgeon and Isaac Asimov and Arthur C. Clarke and Robert Heinlein and Ray Bradbury and all of those guys doing it for the love of it, creating science fiction as we know it. So I wanted to show that world, and I also wanted to talk about why it matters, why science fiction.
Mm.
The idea
Mm.
that tomorrow is by envisioning it and work toward creating it. When Martin Luther King gave the speech where he said, I see a future where the ancestors of slave owners and the ancestors of slaves are sitting together at the table, of brotherhood. He was telling a science fiction story. He was creating a world, a future that did not exist. And by speaking it, he helps to create it. So, so that was the initial idea. And Harlan Ellison had done a audio cassette where he just talked about what it was like to write back then. And he mentioned that often they would get the cover art first, and he would try to race there on the day they got the art to describe a story that looked at that cover.
Oh,
And he said the
Oh.
most difficult one was this girl is sunbathing on a New York rooftop, and this giant grasshopper is looking over the rim of it at her. And he had to say, "That's such I have got this great idea for that story." And so that was the idea that it's DS9 and Cisco's creating that future of people and other races coming together, a future of possibility that Star Trek, the original Star Trek, had presented us with, where fans, millions of people around the world, went to create a better world because they were inspired by Star Trek. It wasn't trivial. Roddenberry did Star Trek. People forget Star Trek aired during the Vietnam War. It aired during the riots in the streets. Cities were burning. Race riots were happening. Martin Luther King was assassinated during the run of Star Trek. Robert Kennedy was assassinated. And but he still had the courage to say, we can have a future where people get along together, races get along together. There's respect
Mm.
for other sentient beings. It's like a message of compassion, it's a big vision, and that takes
How hard must it have been to keep optimistic during those times and to
well,
keep that
both
TOS
Rod
vision?
Serling and Gene Roddenberry were optimists. They were not fatalists. Ray Bradbury once signed a photo where he said, Fahrenheit 451 is not dystopian. He said it's optimistic, it's hopeful because Montag succeeds. The books are going to continue to be read,
Mm.
continue to be memorized. They are not defeated by that oppressive system. And so these were
Mm.
men who saw a very bright future, but it wasn't a future that we were just handed. It'd be a future that we would have to work for, that we would have to will into existence. And so then I pitched Far Beyond the Stars and to Hans Beimler, who he and Ricky Manning had been my bosses on a show I executive story edited called Beyond Reality while Trek was running. And so I pitched it to Hans on DS9, and it didn't sell. And
Oh,
a year
wow.
later, I was sitting in my office at Universal when I was writing and producing Sliders, the 4th season of Sliders. I'd been hired to kinda get the show to work again because the 3rd season of Sliders had just crashed and burned. It was just a mess.
Hmm.
And so all those guys were gone except for one of the writer producers, and they just said, "Fix it." Sci-Fi Channel picked it up. They moved the show back to Universal from Canada. Fix it. So I get a phone call in my office. I'm writing 2 episodes of Sliders back to back, World Killer
Oh,
World
wow.
Killer and Slide Cage. And Hans says, "I've got great news for you." And I said, "Oh, great. Tell me, Hans." He says, "We're buying Far Beyond the Stars." I said, "Great timing, Hans." It's like I'm writing these two.
Yeah, thanks,
So
buddy.
the only time I had to meet with the writing staff on DS9 to basically block out the story, the beats of the story, was lunch. So
Oh,
I drove over
wow.
the hill from Universal to Paramount, and we all got together at Nicodell's, which was a restaurant right by Paramount at the time, and it was the entire writing staff. So it was Ira Bear, Hans Beimler,
Oh, wow.
gosh, who else was there? I mean, just everybody was there, all the writers, Ron Moore, on and on. And Brian Fuller was there, and we just started talking about and batting it around. And and originally, I thought of using Jake as the main character for the story because Jake was an aspiring writer, but Ira said, "No, let's make it Cisco." And that was great. And he said, "Let's make it about race. Let's specifically make it about
Hmm.
race." He's a black guy writing under a white pseudonym. And so he goes home to Harlem at night, and his friends are all black, and they're saying, "Why are you writing a future in which we don't exist?" And he finally has to have the courage to write a future, which is DS9, that's
Yeah.
inclusive. And it was the first Star Trek episode that ever overtly, you know, addressed race in
Yeah.
that way, where Sisko is saying, "I am a black man. I am black." The only one who said that was like Frank Gorshin as half black, half white in Jesus Christ. But okay, so um,
Yes.
but so within that lunch, we nailed down the entire structure, the entire storyline,
Wow.
and they were all fans of the Twilight Zone. They all owned the Twilight Zone companion. They said, "We want this to be as much like a Twilight Zone episode as possible." So
Mm.
Oh, interesting.
when Cisco goes back, he's not Cisco. He's Benny. He's a totally different person. And all the characters he meets, who are Armin and Rene Auberjonois. And the other idea I had was we'd get to see these actors for the first time, see what they look like without.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
that's incredible. That's the big swing because this doesn't it kind of takes the entire crew out of the ongoing
Yes,
story of Deep Space Nine, throws them back in time.
yes,
None of them are
no,
aliens; they're all
that's
human.
right.
So we're seeing Michael Dorn,
Yes,
Worf, for the first
yes,
time out. I think it's the first
yes,
time completely out
right.
of his
And,
Klingon
and Derek
prosthetics.
and all of them. Yeah, and
Gul
yeah,
is there as
yeah,
well as a
everything.
human. And when I watched it, I was very, very young, like 10, 11, 12, something like that. When I watched it, you just watch it as an episode, but then when you get older and you rewatch it, you're like, wait a minute, I know you people. You've just taken
Yes,
all of the
yes,
prosthetics off.
yes,
It's
yes.
such a big swing.
Yeah.
But it's so integral to the story as well.
Well, when I came up with the idea, I said to Armin, "I'm going to write an episode where we get to see your face." It was the same thing I did with Doug Jones on Space Command. Like,
Yes.
because I've written for Armin on many shows actually, and he's great. And so, but the idea was they are not Quark in the past. They are not Odo in the
Hmm.
past. They are different. The idea was that Benny, as the writer, he's gathering inspiration from the people around him, but it's not one for one. When we write a
No.
character, we transmogrify it. We join things together, bits and pieces. So so that was phenomenal. So so I did the outline that weekend, and I actually called Harlan Ellison to check. I called Harlan, and he was so embittered against Star Trek. He never wanted to talk about Star Trek
Oh
because of what
wow.
happened on CD on the Age of Forever. But
Hmm.
because we were friends, he was happy to talk to me. And I said, "Harlan, back in the 50s, were there any black science fiction writers writing under a white pseudonym?" And he said, "Not in science fiction." But he said there was a black writer named Frank Yerby, who was a mainstream writer who was writing under a white pseudonym. And you'd never see a photo of him on any of his books. So
Hmm.
that's very interesting. I asked him a few other questions about
Hmm.
writing back then. And and then I banged out the outline, came out really well that weekend, and at my office at Universal, um, and then I sent it in. It was really solid. And then Hans calls me and he says, "Well, Ira and I are going to write the script." And I said, and that was shocking because at my level as a producer, you're never cut off at story. Never, 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 never. You're
Mm.
the authorial voice. And I said, "Well, wait a minute. Let me call Ira." So I called Ira, and Ira was concerned because he knew I was a producer on Sliders. And I was writing 2 episodes back to back. Now I knew that I had the bandwidth to write Far Beyond the Stars as well. But but I said, "Ira, look, I can do this." And he said, "I'll make you a deal. If you quit your job on Sliders, I'll let you write the script of Far Beyond the Stars."
Oh
I
goodness.
actually considered it for about 90 seconds, and then because we all knew, even at that lunch, we knew this was gonna be one of the great Star Trek episodes. None of us
Hmm.
had any doubt, and, um, and I thought about it, but I couldn't leave my guys on Sliders in the lurch. If I'd
Yeah.
left, they would be so fucked, you know? Those were We were in production, and
Yeah, you're right in the
so I
middle.
called back Ira and I said, "Okay, okay, Ira, But I knew that Ira was a great writer. I knew Hans was a great writer.
Yeah.
And they had the outline, which I nailed down. So it was solid. I had no doubt they were going to do a phenomenal job.
But you want to be in it. You want to be
Yeah.
there to
Well,
the end as a part of you. Must
but
be.
here's the cool part. um, I actually, when I wrote Slide Cage for Sliders, I actually wrote a role for Armin because uh, he and I wrote the last episode of the Ron Perlman Beauty and the Beast that was ever commissioned, the last script, and Armin played a character named Pascal on that show before DS9, and we never met each other at that point, but we became close friends once he was on DS9, and so I wrote a role in Sliders where there's this character, and at one point he says, "My favorite show is Beauty and the Beast, not the Disney one, but the Ron Perlman one," which was sort of an in-joke that Armin would say this line because he had played that role. So, but
That's
then
amazing.
when they were on the Stars was shooting, and
Mm.
Armin had one overlap of days where he wasn't available, and so we had to recast that role. So if you ever watch that,
Oh
if
no!
you ever watch that episode of Slide Cage, that line makes no sense. But
Of course not.
but I had the experience, the writer's dream of having 2 studios shooting 2 of my scripts the
Wow.
same week, and I was on both sets the same day in the same clothes and took photos with both casts.
Oh,
And,
that's incredible.
so I went down to Paramount, and they were shooting on that magazine set, the magazine office, and
Hmm.
all of the cast were there, and I took a photo with them. It's one of the most boring photos ever because it's just guys in
They're
suits.
just in 50s
Yeah,
clothing. Yeah.
exactly, and but they were shooting a scene, and Avery Brooks was directing it. That was Ira's idea, and it was a great idea,
Mm.
and,
Oh, I think that's the only option, isn't
yeah.
it?
Oh, it
It
was.
had
It
to
was.
be. Yeah.
It was. It was. And, but Avery keeps, like, glancing my way because Armin knows me, but Avery had never met me. So finally he says, "Everybody," he says, "Cut," and they said, "Everybody take lunch break." And then I walk up to him, I say, "Hello, Mr. Brooks. My name's Marc Scott. I came up with this story." And he says, everybody stop." And they all stop. And he puts his arm around me and he says, "Say to them what you just said to me." And I said,
Incredible Avery Brooks
Yes,
impression, by the
and
way.
I said, "I came up with the story," and he said, "He came up with the story," and everyone applauded.
Oh, that's incredible.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful.
That's absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh,
Did you get to be there for the scene, his final
Yes,
monologue at the end? Did you get to see
yes. Well,
how?
there's an amazing story about that, which is, well, when you're shooting on film back in the old days, you always say before you shoot a take, or a scene, check the gate, which means see how much film is left in the camera.
Hmm.
Because you only have 10
oh,
minutes of film in a camera, and you wanna switch it out before any long scene, right?
right.
But because Avery was so focused on ramping himself up and getting in the moment and getting in the character, that as he was going through that scene, suddenly from because I was saying next to the DP and the camera, you hear this little sound like flap, 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 and it's like, "The camera has run out of film," and he keeps going for another scene, and it's astonishing performance, and then they have to go to him and say, "We ran out of film midway through that take," and so he has to, and he's given everything he's
Like
got.
that scene is incredible. He is pleading for his right to
Exists.
Yeah.
exist and just to be.
Yes.
And yeah, I can't even imagine being in that
Then he had to
room.
do it again, and he did, of course. But
Hmm.
that was a moment I must tell you. Now my ending was somewhat different from the episode. My
Mm.
ending, he has the breakdown, but then Armin's character stands up for him and insists that he says he'll quit if they don't publish his Benny's story, and they publish it. Because for me, the idea was that, um the story gets out into the world, it has an effect on the world. And so that was one difference, but, rather than him just breaking down and it doesn't get published and he goes to the asylum. But even so,
Yeah.
it's such a brilliant episode. And a coda to that, a postscript, is, 20 years later, they wanted to do something at the big Star Trek Las Vegas con to remember Far Beyond the Stars. So I was back in the green room as they were running the episode for the audience before the entire cast of DS9 and I and Ira
Oh
we
Oh,
were
that's
on
so
wow.
the floor and
fun.
talked about it. So here's the cool part. In the green room, there's a monitor that's showing the episode that's screening out in the audience, right? And normally, nobody's watching that. Normally, people are calling their agent or they're talking to each other or they're making themselves a bagel with cream cheese or lox. Far Beyond the Stars was playing. The entire cast of DS9 and the entire cast of Star Trek, um, what the Discovery were standing there watching it, and you could hear a pin drop. And when Jake's character gets murdered by the police, and Cisco says, "You killed that boy," and the cops don't give a shit. This is right in the middle
Mm.
of Black Lives Matter, and it was like, wow, it's a major studio saying cops kill black kids, murder them, and they get away
Back in
with
the
it.
90s.
It's phenomenal, and this is what Star Trek
Mm.
does so brilliantly. It tells truth to power. It tells, it tells things. It's amazing, and so everyone was just, I mean, everyone was just like stunned at this episode.
Oh, that's
Because the
beautiful.
Discovery cast had never heard of it, of course. And,
Yeah.
it was great. And then to go on in front of the audience and, talk about it was great, just great.
Oh, that's just phenomenal. That's so. It is an episode we will eventually cover on the show, but it's just one of those episodes you want to be really careful with because it has such a weight behind
Yes,
it, and you want to make sure the right voices are being heard with a subject matter like
yes.
that.
Was where everything came together just right. It was like Iron wanted he wanted it to air during sweeps week when the studios and networks set their advertising rates, so they want a good rating, a
Mm.
big rating. So he put a ton of money into it. It had so much in it. And Harlem recreated. I mean, phenomenal. Oh,
It's amazing that recreating Earth is the most expensive part of Star
yes,
Trek.
and that was all shot at Paramount. All Paramount in Los
Oh,
Angeles.
that's
Just
incredible.
great.
It's breathtaking. It really is. What an awesome bit of history to be part of.
Yeah, it really is. And there's so much that you've written on too. There's so
Yeah.
much that you've gotten to see produced. So it's like
Yes.
we're just talking about a couple of like little peeks into specific areas.
Kind of
but
one weekend
Yes.
where you were
Well,
writing something else at the same
I'm
time.
the only writer who wrote for both Deep Space Nine and Babylon 5, and I'm also the only writer who wrote for both Smurfs and Friday the 13th series. And
Well, I mean, come on.
in Friday the 13th series and Smurfs, the characters always said one phrase more than any other, and that phrase was, "Oh no."
That's
But
funny.
completely different
Yes,
context.
sometimes.
That's
amazing.
really
Sometimes.
funny. I
Yeah.
would have never caught
That's
that.
beautiful.
But
Wha-
but this is the cool thing. I'm still making this wonderful stuff. I mean, it's so great.
Yeah.
I mean, like for instance, today, what will I be doing? I'll be working on the script we're about to shoot, and I'll be working on the rough cut of the episode we just shot, and I'll be giving notes on the creature design of what we're about to shoot, and I'll be talking to my editor. He just texted me, "What do you want me to do today?" I have a full editor
Bring
full
me a
time,
sandwich.
yeah, yeah, and then I'm also giving notes on the new book I'm just about to put out. So, it just keeps going on.
It's
And
amazing.
That's
it's
incredible.
super fun. And and in the days to come, Veronica Cartwright's going to be in stuff we're doing. Barbara Bain. It just keeps going.
You're in the soup.
Wow.
Gates McFadden, yeah,
Yeah.
etc. Yeah, it just keeps going. It's fun.
That's incredible. Well, I don't want to keep you from your life for too much longer, but I do want to dip
have
into
a lovely time.
TNG and First Contact because First Contact's such a special episode as well.
Yes, and before we talk about that, I just want to mention two things. One is, anytime you guys are in LA, I will give you a tour of my studio. You're welcome to be part of our world.
Oh, thank you so
Food or
much.
whatever you'd like.
We're
Yes.
there.
And also, anyone who wants to be part of my roundtable, just email me at marcsicree@gmail.com. We meet every Thursday. It's thousands of members around the world. And you can be just starting out. You can be accomplished.
Wow.
There's no judgment of who has talent or who's deserving. If you come with a good heart, you're welcome.
That's
I
beautiful.
love
that is
that.
incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
I think
Yeah.
we're booking some flights to LA next week.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, yes.
we'll be looking into that quickly.
Yes. But in terms of First Contact, I'll talk about that. That's the episode, not the feature. One has to always say that because
Yes.
you know,
Yes.
same
I
title,
mean, First
same title.
Contact is top tier. First Contact, the episode is still incredible. It's still such an important episode.
Well, see, there's a lesson I learned from Harlan Ellison, which was very important. Harlan, of course, wrote what I think is the greatest episode of the original Star Trek, City on the Edge of Forever.
Mhm.
Nothing like it had ever been done before. Phenomenal episode, brilliant. And Harlan at that time ran into a writer he knew, and the writer was chortling because he had just sold a story to Star Trek, and he had basically ripped off a movie, pitched it as a Star Trek episode. They hadn't recognized that it was ripped off from a movie, and they bought it. And it was Flight
Oh,
of the
no.
Phoenix. It was a movie called Flight of the Phoenix, and
Great
it was
movie.
and it was made into the episode Galileo 7, which isn't a bad episode.
Oh, no. I've never made that connection.
Right. But Harlan said to the writer, he said, "You not only cheated them, but you cheated yourself because you had the chance to do something no one had ever seen before
Yeah.
from your heart that could have moved an audience, that could have, changed the world, and you do it." And I always took that to heart. And so I've always everything I've done I always bring my A game. I never slum. I never
Mhm.
look down on things. I always say, how can I make this meaningful to me? And so the great thing about Star Trek Next Gen, when I was story editing Friday the 13th series, we were on the Paramount lot. And this is just before Next Gen aired. So they were shooting, but it hadn't aired yet. So I would go to
Mhm.
the executive dining room for lunch, and the entire cast of Next Gen would be sitting at a table eating lunch in
Oh,
costume
amazing. Yes.
and in makeup. I remember one time Jonathan Frakes got up, I guess, to make a phone call or use the men's room, and being an actor, he was kind of preening and aware that people were looking at him, and he walked
hmm
face first into a pillar. So
Oh no. That's the most Riker thing he could have possibly done.
Yeah.
That's
great.
beautiful.
Yes. But in terms when I was pitching to Star Trek, and I pitched, here's what happened with Star Trek Next Gen, because I knew I wanted to write for it. Absolutely,
Oh, of
absolutely.
course.
And but the problem was that first year was very, very, very tumultuous.
hmm
And so I would go in, I would pitch to a producer. They would want to buy one or more of the stories I was pitching, and they would be fired before they could buy my script. So this happened with Bert Armus, it happened with David Gerald, it happened with Tracy
Ooh.
Torme, on and on. And so, but every time I was pitching to Star Trek, I would clear the slate for 2 weeks and just work on ideas, and I would generate about
hmm
100 ideas.
Wow.
And, then I would boil it down into maybe 4 or 5 fully worked out storylines, and then maybe, some paragraphs, and then, so forth. And I would always pitch the first 4 or 5 fully developed stories, beginning, middle, and end, and they would always wanna buy at least 1 or more of those. And so, um, but because these producers kept getting fired, I,
Just listen to
so
the last guy. He knows.
but
Yeah.
but the thing with Star Trek was I saw that there was this great opportunity to come up with something, first of all, that I'd never seen before. Secondly, that was deeply meaningful. And thirdly, that fit the Star Trek mythos, but had never
Mm.
been part of it yet. And that was the cool thing. It's like I can expand the envelope, but still be playing in that universe, right?
Yes.
So you don't break it, but you just stretch it.
Yes.
And that was a great challenge, a great creative challenge, because I'm still doing on Space Command. I'm always saying, "What have I not seen before? What will make this
hmm
Yeah.
meaningful?" And I'm very proud of Space Command in that same way. But with First Contact, here's what happened with that. I'd spent my 2 weeks, I worked on my full storylines and my paragraphs, and then at the back of my little documentation, I would have, like, one-liners, and I never,
hmm
ever, ever pitched my one-liners because I never had to get that far because the first 4 or 5 stories, one would sell. And I'm not just talking about Star Trek, I'm talking about any show I pitched to.
hmm
And
Mm.
so, because this was the great era of freelancing and being on staff, you could do both.
Right.
I mean, I was frequently writing for multiple shows simultaneously. And in fact, I wrote 2 scripts for 2 different shows in 1 week. And, it was Space Precinct and Forever Night, and I wrote 10 pages of one in the morning, would have lunch to clear my palate, and
yes.
then write 10 pages of one in the afternoon. I did that for 6 days, and at the end of 6 days, I had 2 60-page scripts, and they both got shot. They both got made. So,
That's
but
amazing.
back to First Contact. Okay, so these so it's Michael Piller, and I
hmm
didn't know I was his second cousin, nor did he at that point. So, uh, but he had pulled together this amazing writing staff, and so they schedule it. Get a load of this. They schedule it the day before Thanksgiving at 5 p.m. Okay,
Oof.
nobody wants to be there. Everyone wants to leave and have their
hmm
Thanksgiving weekend, right? So it's a terrible slot. It's really
No
death.
one's listening.
And so I go in, and it's not just Michael Piller taking my pitch. It is the entire writing staff on 2 sofas that
No
come.
pressure.
So Pillar is at this big executive desk, and then there's 2 sofas with, Ira Behr and Ron Moore and
Yeah.
Ellen Braga and Melinda Snodgrass and all of them. And, uh, and so I start pitching. And I'm standing, and they're all sitting, right? I'm standing and I'm pitching. And the first 4 or 5 stories I pitch, the full ones, they like, but for various reasons, they're either doing something similar or they can't do.
Yeah.
There's always they shoot them down. So they just say, keep going. So I then get to my paragraphs. And again, it's the same thing. And they like what I'm coming up with. They realize I know what I'm doing, but nothing's that, right?
Mm.
And Ira Behr, and I'm going like 20, 30 stories, bang, bang, bang. And I'm standing there for about like an hour or two. And Ira Behr says, "This guy's amazing. We should just put him in. He's a story machine." He says we should put him in a room and just have him slide pages out, right,
yes.
under the door. It's like, great. Okay, so and by then I'm of course in a total cold sweat, right? And so finally I get down to my one sentence pitches, which I've
Oh
never
no.
never done. And I say, okay. I say, look, you've done stories with the Prime Directive, where the Enterprise cannot reveal itself to cultures below a certain technological level. And you've done stories about cultures that are above the Prime Directive, like the
Mm.
Romulans and the Klingons, where we can just be who we are. But you have never done a story where a culture reaches a technological level where the Prime Directive shuts off and our guys are sent to make first contact. And there was this hush, and their eyes lit up, and that was the story they had never heard before.
Oh, wow.
It was like, wow. So then it was, they said, "We have to run it by the powers that be, but, we really like this." And so I think that the day a as soon as everyone was back on work, I guess on Monday, they called and said, "Yeah, we're buying it."
Oh,
And,
that's fun.
yeah, and that
And
was
now
that.
you've got to deliver on it. You've got to write the rest. You've got to
That
get
was the
through the rest of the
challenge.
story.
We all agreed. The idea was, it's day the Earth stood still, but the flying saucer is the Enterprise, and the guys who
Yes.
are our guys. And so it's to see our guys as aliens,
Oh,
as
Yeah.
it's so beautiful, and the wrestling they have to do.
So what happened with that one was, I had just come back from Thailand. I'd done a pilot for NBC that we shot in Thailand, and all of a sudden I wasn't feeling well. My weight dropped to 122 pounds, and my mind wasn't working. It was like foggy, and I was tired all the time. And so I couldn't pull this thing together. I knew what it needed to be. So finally I just said, "Look, I can't do it." And finally they never diagnosed what it was, but I started exercising. I got a trainer, and I was able to, through exercise, to get well again.
Mm.
So they were developing the first contact. I'd done the outline, but then again, it was like with Far Beyond the Stars, but for different reasons. And so then when they were about to do the script, I called Michael Piller, and I said, "Look, I was ill. That was what's going on. Let me take another shot at this thing." And he said, "Well, I've never had that. I've never done that, where I've cut
Mm.
someone off at story, and then they come back in to do the script. But sure, you bet. Why not? We still didn't know we were cousins, and weird Hollywood. But I go in, and again, it's the whole writing staff, and I worked out the entire storyline, and soup to nuts. And I told the whole story beat for beat. And Michael paused, and he said, "It's a good story, and it works, but it's not the story I want to tell." So,
Mm.
okay, fair enough. Fair enough. I rolled the ball down the aisle,
Yeah.
fine. That was fair. So I went on to all the other stuff I was writing. And then the episode got written. It was like a gangbang. It was a whole bunch of writers on it
Mm.
from the writing staff. And then the Writers Guild arbitrates the credit, and I was going to get the story credit, of course, solo story
Mm.
credit. And so then once the episode aired, an assistant from Star Trek called me from TNG, and this is DS9 was already up and running, and he called me, said, "Were you ever a judge at a Writer's Digest contest?" And I said, "No. Why?" And he said, "Someone is suing us, claiming that they had submitted the story to a Writer's Digest contest and that we must have stolen it." And so I said, "Well, no, I never was a Writer's Digest judge." And they said,
Oh
"Well, that's
no.
good. That's good." And then I said, "Well, just for curiosity, how many Star Trek episodes are sued?" And, between Next Gen, DS9,
All
all
of
of them.
them.
And yeah, he said all of them, every episode,
Yes.
there's a lawsuit because they had an open door policy, right? They were taking spec Star Trek scripts, which no other show did. When I
And
was
this
on
is why.
Yeah, when I was on Sliders, we were forbidden to,
Yeah. Don't
read.
even open the mail.
Well, the funny thing is, when I was on Sliders, I gave an interview, and they said, "Are you open to spec Slider scripts?" And I said, "No, we absolutely are not. We're forbidden by Universal Legal." So, of course, they printed in the interview, "Oh, yeah, we love spec scripts. Send them along. Send them along." Jesus Christ.
Oh
Oh
So,
no. Drama
Do
very
llamas.
you
funny,
do you
very funny.
remember what your first contact outline was that didn't get made? I know that's a big ask. It's a long
By
time
then
ago.
by then, we had decided that it was going to be the planet sends its first, probe into space, its warp drive, and
Mm.
that's the warp drive signature is what turns off the prime
Right.
directive.
Okay.
And the idea would be that our guys would come there, and it'd be revealing that there's a larger universe,
Mm.
I don't remember the beats, and, someday I'm sure I'll come upon that outline. I've got hundreds of
Yeah.
Star Trek
Little
stories
notebook
I've come up.
buried somewhere.
I have so many Star Trek and DS9 stories. I should publish them sometime, but, I don't remember it all. But that
That's
episode was, again,
so funny.
it was a really good episode, but I'm so glad
It
I got
is.
on the stars as well, because that's the gem. That's the gem.
That's it's the go-to episode. Like, it's not by any means an introductory episode to Star
No,
Trek, but when you
no.
talk about Deep Space Nine, it's the one that gets held up. So yeah, that's what an awesome part of history.
Yeah.
Well, as a little epilogue, our good friend Jonathan, our colleague, will not forgive us if we don't just do a little minute on Friday the 13th.
Sure.
So
Oh,
how did Friday the 13th
How
come
are we
about,
gonna?
sir?
How are we gonna?
What's the segue from
distill
Star
that?
Trek to
Like,
that?
yeah, what's the good segue?
Well, speaking of first contact in your dreams, I don't know. Wait, Far Beyond the
No.
Stars is a dream.
Yes.
Freddie could have turned up in Far Beyond the Stars.
Roby's red hair. So the thing with Friday the 13th, because again, I started in animation. My friend Michael Reeves brought me into animation when I was like 22, and I became the god of animation. I was writing pretty much every show.
Yeah.
I was writing for it, and commanding 3 times what the normal going rate was, and all that stuff. But that wasn't my dream. My dream was to write for live action. My dream was to write for Star Trek. So I wrote a spec live action script. I then got hired to develop Captain Power and the Soldiers of the Future, and I insisted they hired Joe Straczynski, who never had done live action. And those were the producers he then did Babylon 5 with, and so that was how that went. But at the same time, I was hired on Friday the 13th. Friday the 13th is the series as a story editor. The writing staff was 3 people. The entire writing staff. There was a 22 episode order. 11 would be freelance, and 11 would be written in house. But we were going to be doing page 1 rewrites on all the freelance scripts too, because they weren't living and breathing the show every day.
Mm.
When I heard it was called Friday the 13th series, I thought, well, if it's just going to be slasher stuff, I'm not going to do it because I have no interest in that. But when I realized that it was much more like a Twilight Zone kind of show, this is before X-Files. So this was like these 2 cousins and their older friend just decide to undo what their late uncle had done because he'd sold all these cursed antiques. That's a deal with the devil. So we search them out, we lock them up. They are a force for good. So I said when I came on the job, I said, look, our villains can be perverse, but we must not be. So
Mm.
it mustn't be sadism against women, sadism against the helpless. Right? So it was Bill Taub and me. He was a writer who came off Hill Street Blues, and he was my boss. And then above him was the nephew of the head of the studio, who was the ostensible showrunner. He was like in his 20s, um, and we were shooting it in Canada, but our writing staff was on the Paramount lot, and which was a dream come true because Paramount. I mean, I love the studios. I love the back lots. Being able to walk in that world is just
Oh, I
so
can't
You
even
can
fun.
picture
imagine.
it straight
Yeah.
away.
Yeah,
You're like, you can picture it. I'm like, I can't even imagine it.
great. It's great. But so then we started working up episodes. I wrote a bunch of them, and then we had every day we would have a freelance pitch in the afternoon. And I noticed that all the writers who were coming in were white males. So I said to the staff, I said, look, let's shake it up. Let's have different races, different ethnicities. Let's have women. And what I found was that the racism and the sexism were not deeply ingrained. You just needed somebody to say, let's do it differently. And so they started sending in black writers. They started sending in women. We started buying them. For many of them, it was their first sale. Many of them went on to very, very lucrative careers in television. And so we, buying those scripts. And so I wrote a whole bunch of them, and it was fun to have scarecrows after people and, all sorts of stuff. And, I wrote one that was a satire on how Jerry Schuster and Jerome Siegel got screwed over with Superman, where their rights got taken away by the publisher. And I did one where that superhero comes to life and starts killing people. And the creator of the comic book was Ray Walston. And I grew up with my favorite Martian, and so Ray Walston was like one of my heroes.
Oh.
So again, that's one of the great things about writing for TV, because you get to work with so many people you grew up idolizing. And so and
Oh.
then the Writers Guild strike hit back then in '86.
Mhm.
That was '86, and it ran for 6 months. And then when I came back, there was no job anymore, which was fine because I was the story editor on season 1, and I loved it. It was great fun.
Oh, that's so much fun. Jonathan, thanks you. I can hear him wherever
He's-
he's now sleeping saying
Yes.
thank you so much.
He would talk about it. He loves
Yeah,
it.
that's amazing. Well, just to wrap up, thank you so much for your time. We could do this, I think, for 6 hours. So I think we would love to have you back on the show to do this again.
Anytime.
What's next for Space Command? Where can people find you? Where can they support the show? And how to get involved with the world of Mark?
Exactly. Well, you can go to Mr. Sci-Fi. It's MR period SCI hyphen FI, Mr. Sci-Fi on YouTube. I regularly post there. You can watch Space Command there. There's a link to our Kickstarter campaign, which is called Space Command Forgiveness Post Production, and we have 2 more days to go. So you want to jump on there right now rather than
Do
wait
it right
until
now. Stop the
yeah,
podcast.
yeah,
Do
yeah.
it now.
And Marc Zicree at gmail.com. And if you want to be part of my roundtable, email me and I'll send you the Zoom link, or you can come in person and eat at Denny's. And that's a
Oh,
bit of, that's
I'm
what
all
it
for
is.
Denny's.
Let's
Yeah,
do it.
Plane
that's,
tickets from
yeah,
Springfield to you,
yeah,
$650. Denny's
yes,
meal, priceless.
yes.
Yes.
But also, as I said, on our Kickstarter campaign, you can have walk-on roles, you can wear a spacesuit, you can be an alien. It's
That's amazing. But it's been an absolute pleasure. I hope you guys all enjoyed listening to this. My mind is just melting from this incredible sci-fi soup. Well, thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for downloading. Thank you, Mark. Yeah, and live long and Podsper, everyone.
Thanks for listening. Want to connect with the show? Our hailing frequencies are always open through captainspod@cinemasins.com. Like, comment, and subscribe on your podcast player of choice, and be sure to visit cinemasins.com.
I am a happy camper. It is good to see you two. And I'm a big fan of CinemaSins. I've been a subscriber forever. So that's how I heard that you guys were going to do the Captain's Pod.
That's
That's what led to it.
amazing.
Yeah,
What?
you guys are my favorites.
Ah!
Yeah.
That's so
That's so
cool.
crazy.
Well, that's a lot of fun.
When you guys did the trailer on the Star Trek movies, and you said, "We guys are Trekkies. We love this stuff, and we're going to do Captain's Pod," I
Yeah.
called my assistant immediately, and I said, "Get in touch with these guys. I want to be interviewed by them. I want to be on their show." And she went, "Oh, right."
That's incredible. What a privilege. I mean, coming up with Captain's Pod was kind of an accident because we just found out, hey, there's a lot of
Yeah.
people on the
Everybody.
team that like Star Trek. And it doesn't surprise me that there's a lot of Star Trek fans that have a very similar viewpoint and kind of
Yeah.
way of looking at the world. So it's so fun when
Yeah.
those streams overlap. And we tried not to be too
Oh,
harsh on Star Trek.
we ride that line of loving it, and then we also just can't help but be a little nitpicky people.
Oh,
That's
sure.
we can't help it.
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff
Oh,
to
that's
do
incredible.
in Star Trek.
That's so fun.
I remember one day I went into a pitch to Michael Piller on Star Trek Next Gen, and he said, "I've got a really bad cold, so keep your distance." So it's like, okay, great.
Sure.
I'm just happy to be in the same room as your virus. That's
Yes.
fine. I'm happy to be in here.
Yes,
You feel like if you
yes,
catch
yes.
something from them, you'll get better at what you do. Just like give me that virus you've got.
The really weird thing about Michael Piller was that it was only after I wrote, for Star Trek Next Gen that we found out we were second cousins. And
That's
What?
amazing. That's so funny.
my grandmother's name was Agnes Piller. And so we were actually at my uncle Adolph's funeral when I was like 13, both Michael Piller and I, without knowing each other.
Well,
That's amazing.
okay, so we're gonna have to just postpone this and do a little we're gonna have to do the tree, the genealogy tree, to see how we're related. How far
Yes,
back should we have to go?
yes, exactly.
Considering Ian is from England, we're gonna be at this for a
Oh
while.
my goodness.
I'm still a little bit flabbergasted that you already know CinemaSins and you found out about Captain's Pod through that. So that's really, really exciting.
Oh no, you guys are great. I mean, I just love what you do, and it's terrific. I mean, again, I always tell people that my favorite network is YouTube because it has such cool stuff.
So
Mhm.
much.
And I mean, you can watch live TV shows from the 50s. They're rare, super rarities. You can find all sorts of stuff.
It's
It's
so
amazing.
crazy.
Yeah.
I love it.
There's a whole genre of people who just upload their old VHS home
Yes.
cassettes,
Yes.
things that you would, and then you'll find the TV shows that just happen to be recorded, and that's the only reason we still have them, and it's just
That just
fascinating.
blows my mind because back in the day we would just the studios would just delete tapes. I was like, no one's ever
Yes.
going to want to watch this again, so we'll just copy over all of the
Yes.
stuff. Oh,
The fastest route to a career is the Clarion Writers Workshop.
Clarion Writers Workshop.
It's the leading science fiction writing workshop in the country. It started my career. Basically, you go there for 6 weeks. Each week, a different famous science fiction writer comes and lives in the dorms with you. It's 25 students. You write like crazy. Virtually all of the major science fiction writers of the last 40 years have come out of Clarion. So I sold
Okay.
my first short story through Clarion. I was taught by some of the giants of science fiction, and
That's amazing.
I was 19 years old when I went to Clarion, and that really set things going.
Will they let my 6-year-old come with me?
Yes.
Okay.
Deneé, I'm requesting a 25-day leave of absence from
Yes.
CinemaSins.
No. I'm requesting it first.
I'll tell you one story that Ted Sturgeon told me about the original Star Trek. He wrote 2 great episodes, Shore Leave and Amok Time, which is the great one.
Oh,
about
wow.
Spock.
Hmm.
And Ted told me, he said, he said they brought me in to see the rough cut, and he said I never ever pulled my weight as a writer, never pulled rank. I never insisted on anything. And he said, but they had taken out the one line in that episode that was the reason that I had written it.
Oh,
And
no.
I said, you must put that line back in. And they did. And that's where Spock says to the other suitor, he says, you'll find that having may not be as wonderful as wanting, that whatever that line is.
That's the whole point of the episode.
Yes. And,
That's brilliant.
Back in,
Deneé, that is the
Yes.
it's that episode.
Exactly.